I think Islam hates us.
They have done nothing except wreak havoc and terror for our faith and our religion.
When we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad.
Foundations of society are fragile. We must be the shepherds of our own civilization.
Anyone answers either yes or no without making necessary distinctions, both are not telling the truth. They're lying.
Father, we pray that your word will become a hammer that breaks rocks into pieces. That you will raise up in this nation pulpits and prophets that will call the nation back to repentance.
Will you distance yourself from those who think differently, or will you join us at the table and talk about what is really important? This is the Al-Ma'idah Initiative, conversation without compromise.
So, talk to me about, so you were out of Afghanistan last time we talked in Singapore. And then tell me about why you returned back to Kabul.
So, yeah, that's a very good question. So last year, during COVID, I injured myself a little bit. I dislocated my knee at the gym when I was doing some exercises. Probably I did something wrong or didn't warm up properly, but I dislocated my knee. And during COVID and after COVID, I was on the wheelchair and crutches, and it was very, very difficult for me to manage to be alone in Singapore. And the school was not even allowing some of my friends to come and visit because of COVID restrictions. So I had to take care of myself all by myself. And I had to go to the hospital by myself. I had to literally do everything by my own. And it was getting very, very frustrating. I was seeing a doctor regularly. And then one time I went to see him and he was abroad, but there was another doctor. Interestingly, that one doctor, and that one day that I saw her, she said, you know, you've become very, very weak, and you've lost all muscle, and there's a very high chance you're gonna re-dislocate your knee. And at that point, I was already on wheelchair and crutches for like 7 months. And the thought of all of that happening again was quite horrifying. So although it was very, very difficult to return to Afghanistan and like to travel on a wheelchair and crutches, even at that point, when I was thinking that it might happen again, it was quite horrible. So I decided to return to Afghanistan halfway through my first semester of the, technically the third year, but that's a little complicated because I've taken, I had already taken a semester of leave of absence. So yeah, then I returned to Afghanistan, and by January that I had to return back to school, I was still not recovered. And so I took another semester of leave of absence. And I was here, but by February, because I was also getting very bored at home, I started a full-time job, and I started recovering, actually going to the office and like actually meeting people. I think it was already also like something mentally very positive, and it kind of also helped me physically to like get on my feet faster. But yeah, I was there. I was supposed to return back to school by the end of August or July, but because of COVID's ongoing restrictions in Singapore, I had to get an entry approval, and that not time. So I got stuck, and things kind of started falling apart faster than I had imagined.
So let's talk about that process, right? So America withdraws, right? And then you've got 10 days between America withdrawing and the Taliban capturing Kabul, like way quicker than anyone thought was going to happen. Like, tell me what your life is like in those 10 days.
Those 10 days were the most stressful days and the most anxious I have been my entire life, and probably the most I've ever had to deal with. It was quite horrible. At the beginning, when provinces started to fall, I thought, okay, maybe it's one of those times where some provinces start to fall, and then the Afghan army will just like start operating again, and they're going to take control of those provinces. But that's not what happened. Things were actually very confusing. Was wrong. I knew something was going to happen. 2 weeks before that happened, I was seeing Ahmad Massoud, the leader of the resistance front. He was actually urging the government to allow them to resist, but they were not given a chance to fight, not them, not any other province. So, and that was also very interesting because each time I saw that a province fell, there was very little fighting, like from the government back against the Taliban. So the Taliban were just going to the province, and then they were taking over that province like very happily and very peacefully. And this whole process was very simple. Yeah, there was no fighting. They would go to the governor's office, and next morning they would make an announcement. Okay, we've taken control over this province. And at some point, we were still hoping there would be an end point to it, because when they had taken over all of the provinces and only Kabul and Panjshir were left, we were like, okay, maybe they're not going to be able to take over the capital. Like this is just not going to happen. It's the capital. Like this is what we've worked for during the past 20 years. They are not just going to come and like take it. But I mean, of course, that's what happened. They came over to Kabul and they captured the city in 4 hours, which was faster than anyone could have ever imagined. And even that morning when they came, I think the last 3 days, I can tell you a little bit more about that. The last 3 days were the most horrible, because that's when they started taking over the very, very big cities. And the same day that they were coming, I went to office. I wasn't sure if I should go because I knew that maybe something was going to happen. And 3 days ago, they made an announcement saying that next Friday prayers is going to be held in Kabul. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a very strong statement. And then I think 3 days before they came to Kabul, they made an announcement saying that we're going to be in Kabul in 72 hours. And they were exactly in Kabul 72 hours after that. So I went to work and everyone was very anxious. I have videos that I can share from that time. And one of my colleagues, so there's a very flag, but there's one presidential palace. There was one. And when they were taking over the provinces, I told myself, and I spoke with my sister, and I told her too, that I am not going to be able to watch them like take these two flags down. So before they took over, sorry, I was saying, I went to office and one of my colleagues was looking into a picture that was photoshopped. So the flag was down and the flag of Taliban was raised, but that was a Photoshop picture because people thought that was going to happen. Yeah, so my colleague was looking at that Photoshop where the flag of the Taliban was raised in the presidential place, but they were not in Kabul yet. So that was just a Photoshop picture. And he was also listening to one of these patriotic songs and he was crying. And I saw many other of my colleagues, they were also very anxious and some of them were crying that same morning in the office. And it kind of made me cry, but I tried not to cry and I didn't. And I was just like, no, this, the capital, it has to resist. We have like 100,000 forces alone in Kabul. Like, even if they have surrounded Kabul from like 12 different angles, this should not happen. And we just sat there. We couldn't really focus to work. We were talking about this for like an hour or 40 minutes. And then we were just sitting there. All of us received calls from our families and they were like, the Taliban are in Kabul. You guys have to come home from the office. And we returned and then we were just stuck. But yeah, I think those 10 days, I'm sorry, I think I spoke a little bit too much, but they were quite horrible, specifically the last 3 days when they started to like come over to Kabul, and that's where we were living, and everything was just lost overnight.
So I remember just the saddest part for me was watching like people share like government propaganda posts on Facebook, where you'd have pictures of like the Afghan special forces going out ready to battle. You'd have pictures of the president looking very serious with all these sort of troops and being like, we're still in this, and just at that point kind of knowing, or at least having a very strong hint that it's just over at this point and they're giving people false hope.
Yeah, I think it was like that. We were given hope, but we didn't know if we should hang on to that, because sometimes when I was trying to be positive, I really admired the president. Like I also worked for him, like for a few different projects, and he was a person that I actually really looked up to, living in Kabul, and like just over the past few years that I remember. I hate him. That's just so that's clear. And I was also seeing all these pictures, but then I was seeing posts from the other people who surrendered, like Atta Muhammad Noor in Balkh, or General Dostum, who was also fighting in Mazar-e Sharif province. This whole deal that's happening, it's bigger than we imagine, and the threat is actually facing Kabul now too. And I was like, yeah, you really have to be kidding me now. Like, what are you guys for? Like, what are you doing? And yeah, I was also seeing videos of the security people kind of delivering this message that Afghan army together with the US troops are kind of taking care of the city and nothing's happening. The Taliban have surrounded Kabul, but they are not going to enter. So people should not panic. And when I was seeing people at that point, I was trying also like not to be more negative. I was like, yeah, nothing's gonna happen. Like, don't panic. We're gonna get through this. It's fine. And then there was just like, yeah, false hope. No news for 4 hours. The first news after that is president leaves Afghanistan.
That's terrible. And remind me how old you are.
I'm 20.
You're 20, right? So America has been in Afghanistan for 20 years, and you are 20. So this Afghanistan is the only Afghanistan you have ever known, and the nation that you loved, you grew up in, you were hoping to live in your whole life, right? So what we were so picking up, right? After Kabul has fallen to the Taliban, you still have this window where Western nations are evacuating people. Tell me what those few days were like for you.
I think that those were also some of the most frustrating days of my entire life, because it was risky for us to be in Kabul. Myself personally, I've been doing sports and music and I've been an activist in Afghanistan. My mom has been working with the national radio and television of Afghanistan for like 40 years, even during the past Taliban regime. My little brother is an animator who made videos that actually target and they were doing in the country. Same with my sisters, my uncle, who's the founder and director of Afghanistan National Institute of Music. A lot of risk, and we're very, very scared that, especially when the Taliban started to search houses, we were like, okay, maybe they're gonna come for the people, and they started like killing some artists and all of that. So we were trying to leave as soon as possible. We were in contact with the people who were evacuating people because we worked with international NGOs and organizations, and we were supposed to be evacuated.
Wait a second. So
yeah,
they were killing artists in Kabul or somewhere else in Afghanistan, or what's?
In provinces. I saw so many of the traditional folklore singers and musicians being killed. Some of them published on social media, some of them were not. Some of them I knew, some of them I totally didn't know that they were actually like these singers in the provinces, because they were in the provinces, and I don't listen a lot to traditional music. But yeah, I was also hearing from the people who were living in those provinces that this was happening. In Afghanistan, they were threatening people. I have friends who've been threatened, but not just musicians, literally like everyone who do something that Taliban are against. And the friends that I've known, my friends, they started hiding their own in musical instruments. I did that, but I also put my guitar somewhere that was at least there. Like, music can offer a lot of help during such times. But yeah, back to evacuation. We were hoping to be evacuated. I was mostly worried for my family, my mom and brother. I don't know, at that point, I just wanted them to be safe first. Like, yeah, I had a couple of chances to be evacuated alone, with the National Cycling Team, with some people from the Music Institute and some other organizations, but they didn't have my family on the list. So I didn't accept to leave Afghanistan alone and leave my brother and mother behind. So that's why I stayed. But every time we were receiving a call to go to the airport, and like they were giving us a location, they're like, you have to get on the buses and come to the airport. And we were sitting in the bus, we were going to the airport. The Taliban were not allowing the bus to go inside. Then the bus would just be stuck behind the airport for like 20 hours or 18 hours. And then at the end, they were like, oh, the gate is not going to open, so you guys have to return back home. And at the same time, we were seeing all these planes flying empty to so many countries. And that was just so frustrating because, yeah, people are literally in need of evacuation because they are greatly endangered, but the planes are flying without anyone inside. And then at the same time, you're offering all these fancy speeches about how extraordinary this mission was, and you evacuated about 120,000 people, which really is a joke, because the 120,000 that you evacuated, I don't think that even 10% of them are the people who actually had to be evacuated. I know people evacuated who were not like in a lot of danger. Okay, I'm happy for them, they're evacuated. They're probably going to have really good opportunities to grow themselves wherever they are and to develop themselves. But the people who actually had to be evacuated, most of them are still left in Afghanistan. People with international passports, people who work with international organizations, activists, journalists, musicians, athletes, and all of these people are still stuck in Afghanistan, and they are facing threats every single day.
So, I mean, I can imagine how frustrating that would be. I mean, it's frustrating this side, right? Because from this side, and the more like military and intelligence people I talk to, people are embarrassed by this, right? This is probably the most embarrassing foreign policy move that America has made. As far as, at least as far as how it's gone there. And if maybe there's something else we're not thinking of because we're too young, but this is certainly the most embarrassing in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So it must feel very frustrating trying to hear people try and spin that as like, good job, guys, we did it.
And that should not have happened. We shouldn't have had to leave their homes behind. The Afghan army, they shouldn't have had to be evacuated. The Taliban shouldn't have had to announce a general amnesty. That really makes me angry. When I first heard it, I was just like, yeah, the hell with that. Like, nobody really has done anything for you to forgive them for. We have to forgive you for what you've been doing in the country for the past 20 years. And now you're announcing a general amnesty, and you're still going and killing people behind the scenes. So that's a joke. That's just nonsense that you're speaking. And yeah, the whole evacuation was also just very, very, it was making me so angry, because all these people who actually like studied and worked and educated themselves to work in the country, now they're just gone. That's just very sad. And now all these people are just going to go to a different country and work for them and not for their own country, because they're not really given a chance to work for their own country. Because on the other hand, the Taliban are saying, oh, we actually want to work for Afghanistan. And the US also said, we worked for Afghanistan, not just the US, the international community. And it sounds like a joke, because, okay, you worked for Afghanistan, you replaced Taliban, like we previously say with Taliban 2.0, you kind of evacuated all the people who could be very, very helpful in Afghanistan. And even now, both the international community and the Taliban are, yeah, we want peace in Afghanistan. We want development in Afghanistan, but this is not how development is going to happen.
Right. So I want to read to you something from the book of Lamentations, which is, so Lamentations is like a lamentation is an English word that means like expressing sadness through like song, basically. Right. So this is supposed to be a song sung about people who've had to leave their city because it was destroyed by a foreign power. And it really resonated with me looking at what's going on in Kabul. So Lamentations 1 says, how lonely sits the city that was full of people. how like a widow has she become, she who was great among the nations, she who was a princess among the provinces, has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks among all her lovers. She has none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. Treacherously means like betrayed. They have become her enemies.
Wow, I think I can really relate to that. Thank you for reading it. Looking at Kabul and looking at Afghanistan in general, mostly I've been unable to like describe what it looks like and how it feels like to be there, and to like what it feels like to lose it. But yeah, even when I was in Kabul, looking at Kabul, the closest I could get was that Kabul is like a dead city now. Like there's no color to it. There's no laughter. There are no people. Everything that I actually looked forward to every time I was coming to Afghanistan for my summer break or anything, all of them are gone, including my friends, literally everything. So yeah, I think that also resonates with me quite a lot. So
so the several failed attempts to get into the airports and get out via flights. Tell me what's going through you and your family's heads as the last plane leaves the Kabul airport.
At that point, it was like we kind of were hanged for a while. We're like, yeah, now we're actually stuck in here. And so much is happening. Like there's so much censorship. Not many people actually know what's happening in Afghanistan. This is all this has all been pre-planned, of course. Like this is not something that just came out of nowhere. But we were very worried that things might start to go wrong now, and there might be no chances to leave because there were no commercial flights. The borders to some of the neighboring countries were already closed, and the last plane also left Afghanistan, and we couldn't manage to get into one. And at that point, I don't really know how to describe it. It was very frustrating because we couldn't go to work. We couldn't move on with the activities that we had to do daily in Kabul, but we couldn't also escape. And so we were just stuck. And but we were trying to be positive also. Like sometimes we were speaking with the people who were in charge, and they were trying to kind of keep us positive by saying that, this whole process was a mess. Now that this plane has left, there would be more chartered flights, there would be more flights, and the borders were open, and people will actually be able to live with more comfort. But it's still very frustrating at first, but then we were trying to not lose hope, and I think just wait to see what happens.
So from the moment the last Western evacuation leaves, you are in Afghanistan for 18 days under Taliban rule. So describe a day in your life before the Taliban took Kabul, and then a day in your life after the Taliban took Kabul.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Before the Taliban came to power, I had I was waking up very early, usually even for I had an early class in the morning, a German language class, would start at a.m. I was very excited waking up for that. And sometimes even I was waking up earlier than that to go for a bike ride before starting my day. And I was going to my German class. From there, I was going to the office, the job that I had. It was a full-time job with one of the digital media companies in Afghanistan. And that was so much fun. I loved my job. I loved my colleagues. I loved the environment, literally everything about it. And I would just be there. I was also taking my classes at work. I would have like 2 or 1 classes a day because my semester started in school, and I was just catching up with everything online until I was supposed to have my entry approval. So following up with that, by the end of the day, I would go for making some music with my musician friends, or I would just go to a nice cafe and I would hang out with my friends. And I know that like just hanging out with friends in a nice cafes, not a very big thing for many other people, but that's a big thing in Afghanistan. That's a thing that like started to happen like recently. Yes.
I actually, you say it's not a big deal, but actually I think after like the COVID and the lockdowns over the world, there's a lot of people that means a lot to right now. Right?
Yeah.
In 2019, it's something people would take for granted. But for me, it's like I value that so immensely now. So I get you. I totally get why that's a big deal. And it's just this, normal life type thing that happens in big cities that makes life
Thank you
there
for
feel normal.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of parallel to mention, because I didn't think of that, but I think now a lot of people understand what it feels like. And like, imagine what it's like for Afghan people who haven't had that for like the past almost 40 years, and these like nice little places to hang out with your friends and like music places. They just started being built in Kabul, and it was very, very new for many of us, even living in Kabul. So it was something that people valued very greatly, and like they were valuing every moment of like being able to sit with their friends and like have a cup of coffee, make some music, talk for a little bit. Although there was a mess in the city, like even with the international community there and the Taliban fighting against them, but people started to be like, we're continuing to be positive and to work for develop for a bright future. But yeah, and a day after the Taliban came to power was just me being trapped at home all day long, every day just trying to kind of fill up evacuation forms and like trying to get myself and my family out of Kabul. It was a mess. When I think about it, I don't even know like how those days were passing by. It was really messed up. We were trying to be evacuated, didn't work. We were trying to look for other options to leave the country. And I stopped my classes because there was just like a lot. I was not in the right mental state, but I also had a lot to do with the whole evacuation processes and just take care of everything. And after that, I was just at home for those like since August 15, I was at home until September 18 or 19. And yeah, I was not allowed to go out.
So, but were there any times you actually kind of went out and had any interaction with the Taliban members?
I had a few actually, yeah. The first time that I saw them was very scary. I also I never thought that one day I would have to see the Taliban in person. I just always saw them on TV and like on social media and on the news, and they are very scary. Their appearance, which they should take care of, by the way, is just horrible. Like I would see them from 10 meters down the road and I nearly fainted. They're very scary. They have like a big gun. They have a turban. I'm sure you've seen thousands of their pictures. But the first time I went out, I was very, very tired at home and I just wanted to grab a cup of coffee from the cafe nearby our house. And there was a Talib sitting behind a car, like at the back of a car. And I had my face mask, I had my glasses, I had the scarf. I was wearing my mom's clothes because they were long and I thought, okay, maybe this is better. And he just shouted at me to cover my face. And when I told that to my mom said, oh no, you probably misheard him. And I know my mom said that because she didn't want me to panic, but I actually heard the guy was like, just cover your face, like with a scary, loud voice, that appearance, horrible. And then there was another time. You do hear me?
Yeah, the video is weird, but the audio is fine.
Your video froze.
Yeah, yours is frozen too. But there you're back.
Okay, great. Wait, you're back too. So you heard the first part, right, about the covering face.
I heard all of it.
Gonna tell you about.
Yeah. So
okay.
The guy
I also had other interactions with the Taliban. Yeah, that part. I had more interactions with the Taliban. There was another time where I also got super, super bored at home and it was just very frustrating. My mom said, okay, perhaps we could just like take a walk. And we did, and there were a group of the Taliban on the corner of the streets. And I looked at them. I really wanted to speak to them because I don't know. I was just really tempted to talk to them. I never really talked with a Talib. So I told my mom, maybe we would just ask them for something. We know the area, we live there, but there's a hospital called emergency hospital. And I told my mom, maybe you could ask them where the emergency hospital is and see like how they respond. And my mom asked them for the emergency hospital. And the guy was actually so happy that we talked to them. Like we talked to them like a normal person. When we asked them, he like all of them stood up and they were like, yeah, you just go down the streets and then you take a left, there's the emergency hospital. And when we left, they spoke in Pashto and they were talking to one another. And they were actually very happy that somebody spoke to them like a human being, like they were treated normally, they were spoken to normally. And that was just very sad because it's heartbreaking to see my own people being misused to like kind of turn into these Taliban guys. I also had another funny interaction with them. I went to pick up my electronic ID card and there was a Talib guy as a guard in there. And when we wanted to enter, he told my mom, you know, maybe you could stay outside because I'm very shy. And my mom was like, no, I'm not gonna stay outside. Like the waiting area is inside. So you have to like go aside and I'm gonna go and sit inside. And then the guy just turned to the wall and he turned his chair and he was just like looking at the wall. And I understand why that's happening or why they're very happy that people talk to them normally. Not many people speak to them normally and they have the right not to do so. I watched a video where some of the Taliban are just sitting there, a couple of women go to them, they're like, yeah, just wait until Ahmad Massoud comes to Kabul and we're gonna send you back to the mountains and to the caves. And so I understand like I understand where people are coming from and where the Taliban are coming from as well. I think to an extent, maybe not completely. But yeah, these are just some of the interactions I had with the Taliban.
Yeah, well, fundamentally, right, it's like as messed up as the ideology is, the Taliban are still people.
Yeah,
It's made up of people, and all people have good things about them and bad things about them. So sounds like your experiences, you've had a pleasant interactions as well as having some less pleasant ones, and obviously,
yeah.
and I think that's actually part of what the West actually has a hard time dealing with. We get so detached from our enemies that we forget they're people. So
Yeah.
when they're people, it takes us off guard, right? So we don't actually know how to have principled opposition to people who are actually people. We have to turn them into cartoon monsters in order to actually maintain any conflict. So people don't have the category of, yeah, what you're doing to the world is terrible and you can be a nice person sometimes.
Yeah, I guess. And I think like we should not forget why these kind of systematic problems keep on increasing and like there's no end point to it. I mean, why are there Taliban fighting against their own people? I have friends living in the rural Afghanistan and they have families there. And I've known like people from like the parliament, some of the provinces, the Taliban give these guys like $80 salary per month with a motorbike. And because they don't have a job and they don't have a source of income to support their family, they go become part of the Taliban. And most of them, they haven't even gotten their salary of the first month when they are killed, because they go into the battlefield. So it is very heartbreaking to see people misused like that.
So one thing that's interesting to me, and I think people need to understand, is that in parts of Afghanistan that are not Kabul, there are some people that are very happy that the Taliban have taken over. Whereas in Kabul itself, that's the opposite. And maybe other places as well. There's not monolithic.
Yeah, I think there could be like a lot of reasons behind that. I can't, maybe there are more reasons I can't think of because there's still a lot I need to learn. But just some stuff that I've observed is that there were political leaders who were very corrupt, and they also tortured people and they hurt people, especially in rural Afghanistan that we didn't really know much about. I can tell you an example. There was a commander living in Kandahar, and he was someone who actually forced people to leave their houses. He took their women by force. He raped women. He took their money. He took like everything they had. And so when the Taliban came, they executed this guy, and that was not happening anymore. And so people were very, very happy about not having to deal with someone like that anymore. But in the meantime, there were also, in the same province, Taliban were also committing crimes, and people were still happy with them, but not. They were happy that they didn't really have to suffer to someone like that anymore. And so I think that was happening in some provinces. And when the Taliban came to power, there was like kind of an end point to some things. And so maybe that's why some people are quite happy with the Taliban. But I think more importantly is that there are actually people I even observed before the Taliban came to power with the same mentality as the Taliban. So I think that is probably like having the same mentality is probably why they're quite like comfortable with the Taliban. I'm not blaming people. I'm not generalizing this, but the majority of Afghan population are uneducated. They haven't had a chance to work or study. But I'm not saying that this is why like they're happy. I've been many people who haven't had a chance to go to school, be very open-minded, and just try to like do whatever they can. But I think that the two reasons that I can think of is one that I mentioned, and the other that we have actually a lot of people with the same mentality as the Taliban.
Well, and I think if you have the same mentality as the Taliban, it's actually quite hard not to have some measure of respect for them, because I think we were talking about this last time we were here, right? Because on the one hand, you have this project to try and build this Afghanistan that supersedes tribe, and there's a certain capacity that the Taliban is this dark but successful version of that just kind of has this sort of center of gravity with anyone who shares their ideology, that's going to make them compelling to a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know how it all started. Like, it's very interesting to me that there are a lot of people with the same ideology as the Taliban. There are men and women sharing the same mentality and ideology as the Taliban. I have no idea how it started, where it started, but I know that many things that they are committing is just incredibly wrong. And I do understand I totally understand why people are kind of gravitating more toward becoming part of that. And it's not only like sharing the same ideology. Some people maybe don't have the same ideology as them at first, but then they start to get that later. And how is that? There are many things that lead to that. One that I can think of is that so many innocent people were also killed by the international forces in Afghanistan. And each time they did that, the people that were killed, their brothers and relatives went and became part of the Taliban because they wanted to take revenge and they wanted to fight back against the Western kind of civilization in Afghanistan. So that kind of, it does contribute to this network kind of growing each and every day. So I think that, there are many things that lead into that. And but overall, it's just very disappointing.
So, and then with your workplace, you had a job that you enjoyed and liked. What happened to your work after the Taliban took over?
Yeah, my work just vanished. So what's interesting is that when the Taliban came to Kabul, they started appointing their own people and CEOs to so many governmental organizations and offices. But I didn't think that they could actually do that to private businesses. I work with a digital media station that was actually a small business. And it was a private business, so they should have not been able to appoint their own CEO. But they came, Anas Haqqani, actually, he came to our office, and that was very interesting because he didn't go anywhere. And the first place he kind of came to was our office in Afghanistan. And then right after that, he appointed one of these like religious scholars as the head of a digital media station. And the next day, and now all of the guys can start coming to work, but girls, you should not come to work at this point, because we have to make further instructions about how you should come to work, how you should dress up. We're going to separate your office so that you have no interaction with the male colleagues and all of that. And then even that, it never happened. We never received any calls to return to office. And that guy has not even been able to give the salaries of this stuff. I mean, I understand that it's not really like, it's easy to, okay, appoint your own people and all of these places, but can you really do the work? This is a very small instance that I have observed and I have experienced, but I'm sure this is what's happening with ministries, bigger organizations like the National Radio and Television of Afghanistan, and all these places that actually like, that's the fate of Afghanistan. We're kind of like in hands of a few illiterate people, like the people who actually could work in the country, they are gone. Thank you to our own political leaders, Western, international community, and the Taliban.
So obviously there's a sense that your life under the Taliban is being indoors, right? So at what point are you actually able to start planning your escape, and how did you escape?
Yeah, that's a very interesting story. So there was honestly no plans to escape. It was something that at some point we just had to leave. We had no plans for it, and we didn't really plan it like properly to kind of like what's going to happen to our house, like what are we going to do, how we're going to go. It just happened. And like all the time we were just like, even during the last 18 days, we were receiving like sudden calls to kind of go to one of the neighboring countries, and by land though, because there were no flights available. So the one time we did receive a call, we came to the border to one of the neighboring countries, and the border was closed. So we had a road trip for 5 hours and a half. We left Kabul at 2 a.m. and we came to the border. We were there until 5 p.m. The border didn't open. So we returned to Kabul, another road trip for 5 hours and a half. And the entire day, like just waiting for the border to be open, that was horrible. Like I was seeing these stuff on the TV and on social media, but I think I never thought that one day I'd have to go through it. But we returned back to Kabul, and we were told that the border would remain closed for a number of days, but it opened again, and we received another call, and we were like, yeah, we understand like how difficult it was the last time you went, but hopefully this time it's not going to be the case. We've managed everything. We're in contact with the authorities, so you're going to pass the border like easily and quickly, and hopefully that will not be a problem. So we just left the second time, but I don't think we really planned it. Like we just took a bag of our clothes and left, and everything is in Kabul. Our house is in Kabul. Right now we're trying to take care of stuff. Now that we're sure that we might not be returning to Afghanistan soon. I personally, I'm gonna go back the first chance I get, but I don't know if that's the case for my family. And so my mom's trying to like take care of the house, and so she's speaking with my aunts to like kind of like slowly start shifting stuff. So there was really no plan, but we were just told to go to the border twice, and the second time it just worked. But right now we're kind of like learning a lot of stuff as we go along with this whole process.
So okay, I just have a couple of detail questions, which is kind of irrelevant but also fascinating. So what is the road like? Is it like traffic all the way, or is it like empty? Like what's it like getting gas in Afghanistan right now for your car? Like how do you fuel your car?
These gas and oil stations, they still function as far as I observed. So that was not really a problem. There were like gas stations everywhere, and the drivers could just get gas, but the roads were not very crowded. There was no traffic. It was very, very empty. The car was moving very fast. There were Taliban checkpoints like all the way. Like I think every 15 minutes we were seeing a Taliban checkpoint. But when they were seeing that like women are sitting inside, they were letting us go. Only at one point we were stopped and like asked a lot of questions about where we're going. But when we first sat in the car, there are companies who actually transport people and they get them to the other side of the border. So the driver, because he was very experienced, he told us that if the Taliban asks where we're going, because we're passing through this province, you guys will tell them that, okay, we actually come from that province. We were at home to see our grandparents. So now we're going back home to our own home. And that's what we told them. And they kind of give us a very mysterious look and they were like, yeah, okay, go. But the driver who was transporting us, he also had a Taliban flag in his car. So I think when they saw that, they were like, yeah, you can just go. But yeah, the roads are quite empty. They're highways, they're very beautiful. And at the same time, heartbreaking that we had to like observe this beauty at this point that we have to leave Afghanistan. I was looking at the roads and like the beautiful mountains and like the lakes and rivers. And I was like, yeah, these are just on the hands of all these people. So I think that's what was on my head, like the entire way we were coming to the border. But yeah, very empty, cars moving very fast, but quite beautiful.
So then you get to the border. What's the crossing like? How long does that take?
Oh yeah, the first time we didn't cross. The second time it was very easy, but that's not the case for everyone. I think that day we were having a lot of luck, and there was a Talib guy who looked at. I'm just gonna tell you the process. He looked at our passport. He could not read. He could not read anything. He couldn't read what was written on the passport, and he was just like looking at the pictures, and then he was giving the passports back. We left. They opened the bags, the luggages, to look inside. One of my friends, she had like one of like a traditional Afghan clothes on top of her luggage. And when the Taliban look at that, he's like, yeah, we have a lot of respect for women, so we're not going to check their luggages. And so they didn't check the other luggages. And we crossed. Then there was a COVID place test, which was really messed up. It was a disgusting COVID place. There's literally a guy sitting there with dirty gloves, and he is testing people for COVID. And when they are COVID positive, people give him a little bit of money, and he writes negative, so people cross the border. Yeah, and then there are checkpoints.
That's like so ridiculous that it's funny, right? There's somebody. There's like this humanitarian crisis right now of people fleeing Afghanistan from the Taliban. And then some bureaucrat somewhere is like, okay, check they don't have COVID.
Exactly. I am very shocked and surprised that with all this happening, the biggest concern for some of these countries that could actually be helpful at this point is whether they have COVID. Like, seriously? Why? And the way they're testing people for COVID in that public place, like, I'm sure that many people are getting hundreds of more diseases from that place that I observed than kind of being tested for COVID. It was a disgusting place. And the guy was like going outside, like it's dirty, it's full of dust, and coming back testing people. And he was not even a very professional. I've done the COVID test many times before, but the way he was doing it, it was not right. I could tell it was not right. And yeah, and then at the end, you could just give him a little bit of money and he would write negative. So there's really no point to it.
There's just so much that's absurd about the world right now.
Exactly.
COVID hits the Afghan border. I was just in England, and there's like a gas shortage there. So England is having a gas shortage, but somebody fleeing Afghanistan has no problem getting fuel. It's life is absurd.
Yeah.
So okay, so does anything happen inside you once you finally made it out of Afghanistan? Sadness, relief, anger, numbness.
Anger all the way. Still, we shouldn't have had to leave our home. I'm just every single day. My biggest hope is my mom tells me sometimes about the day when they woke up and the Taliban were gone. Like one day they woke up and there were the Taliban. Then 5 years later, one day they woke up and there was no Taliban. And I'm just really hoping that that happens. And whenever that happens, I'll be on a plane to Afghanistan the next day. I really hope that happens. I'm still very angry. I think about home. I think about my friends who are now kind of like in so many places in the world. I'm not sure when I'll see them again. And yeah, a lot of frustration, I guess.
So what's the process you guys are in now? Are you like officially refugees? Are you still on a student visa? Like how does that all work for you right now? Like
So we're not. So yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
no, it just yeah, like there's an Afghan, like technically you have a passport for a country that doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. People still. That's a very good point that you're referring to. I'm gonna talk a minute about that, and then I'll tell you about what we're kind of like dealing with everything like. And so yeah, it is frustrating to see that, you know, we're having all these passports, but like for what? And my other friends who are in some countries, like they're either studying or working, so many people are having their passports expired. And I mean, fortunately, there are still consulates that help them get a new passport. But I know that the people who are in Afghanistan, their passports are not going to be reliable if they like start getting one now, because now the government is not really officially recognized. And so I really hope that they take care of that soon. There are so many other horrible stuff happening through you know, this crisis that should be taken care of, at least for now. And for us, we're not officially like refugees for now. We are having we had our visa interviews for one of the countries just 2 days ago. So at this point where we are, we have like a short-term stay for like another 2 weeks, but hopefully our visa stuff could get processed until then. And then we have applied for visas. I don't know the kind of visas that we will get, considering the situation. It will probably be the humanitarian visa, but I don't know what's going to happen when we leave this country. But for now, we're not refugees. We haven't registered ourselves as refugees, and we're hoping that things will go well and we'll get our visas within 3 weeks. And then I'll see what happens after that. Maybe it will be the case once we're in another country, but I really don't know. I'm like learning as I go along with this process.
Right. I mean, it's not like this is a super well-developed rule book for something like this. So clearly you're someone who always has hope for the future. So you wanted to graduate college, be a scientist, and then go use that in Afghanistan. So like have you had much time to process like what do you do now?
Yeah, sometimes I think about it. I think I've thought about it for like 2 or 3 times. It has crossed my mind. And I think that hopefully by the time I graduate college and like do my master's and PhD, things will get better and I'll still be able to do that. But yeah, like speaking about education right now, most of what I'm thinking is that if the people who worked in Afghanistan could invest in education, actually, like during the past 20 years, like proper education, this mess would not have happened. I know that people have been educated, people have achieved many things, but there was no investment in education the way it should have been past 20 years. So I still think it's needed in Afghanistan. I'm just really hoping that I'll have a chance to do that. Right now, I don't really know. It's just I'm in a state of confusion, and I don't know what's going to happen with Afghanistan, but my biggest hope still is to be able to go back and work for STEM education in the country when I graduate.
I think it's worth looking at other diaspora communities and how they have learned to pivot and keep their cultures alive when they've been out of their homeland for a long time. And there have been lots of several cultures that have done this successfully. Like I know right now in Yemen, there's like a fund to send a lot of the sort of Yemeni youth, who a lot of them have grown up in Saudi, to do education overseas. So I think you're right not to give up hope, but I think there may be meaningful work for you to do in the Afghan diaspora that keeps the sort of dream and culture you're a part of alive in some ways that are not as good as having the Kabul that you love back, but can go some way to keeping the dream alive.
Yeah, I agree that. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that I will be able to do that after my studies, or maybe even like during my studies. I'll be still able to help some people with that. But you're right to say that it's not going to be like, you know, having Kabul, the city that I dearly love, back. And even sometimes I think that even if the situation gets better, it will still not be the same exactly. But yeah, I think there's a lot of hope still.
Right. There's no going back to exactly what it was.
Yeah, I don't think people will ever feel the same again. Like, they're not going to forget this. Me, my friends, people who had to live through this. For some people, it's like, it's not the first time this is happening. Like, my mom is experiencing this for the third time. But for me and my friends, I don't think we'll ever forget this.
How do you think it's different? How do you think how do you think this hits your mom differently than it hits you? Do you think, like, do you think she's more sad than you are, less sad than you are? Like, how is that different for her, having lived, being this her third rodeo?
I try asking her that. Sometimes I don't really like know how to ask her, because I don't know if I should. I don't know what she's feeling. Like, I'm like, is she really used to it? Like, so that she's not feeling bad about it anymore because this is happening for the third time? Or is this more horrible because this is happening for the third time? But yeah, I think at least for my mom, this is not new. But for me, it's something new. Like, yeah, and I think I had a lot of hopes and dreams that I was holding on to, that I still do, but like maybe not in the same way. But for my mom, like, she pretty much sacrificed all her life, and she also like invested in us so much, because so many of the things that she wanted to achieve and couldn't because of war, she kind of like wanted to see that all of those things in us, and so she invested in us a lot, and she sacrificed, and it's kind of like she's watching that fall apart as well. So I don't know if it's difficult for me more or for my mom, but it's definitely terrible for both of us.
Yeah, it is awful.
Yeah.
One thing that I think I think is worth thinking about here is that I think education is really, really good, but I think that you're doing something that what needs to happen in Afghanistan is deeper than education. So, like, the reason somebody joins the Taliban, sometimes it may be because they're illiterate and uneducated, but more than that, it's like a worldview, right? And when you have a worldview, education gets filtered through that worldview. So it's not just a battle for the mind of Afghanistan. While there is that, there's also a battle for the soul of Afghanistan as well. And so what you'll see is that this is not a battlefield that's completely it's not a battle that's completely unique to Afghanistan, right? You see this you actually see this from very on in Islamic history, that there's this battle between people who are kind of like the Taliban in their worldview, and then people who are not like the Taliban, and there's this kind of war being waged for the soul of the civilization. And if you give people money and resources and education and training, this doesn't necessarily go away. Just the types of battles, may change slightly, but there's some deeper things to address there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just think that education is like one of the kind of, it could be one of the kind of base things in here, because usually from what I observed in Afghanistan, like, the provinces falling apart, a lot of things needed to be taken care of, but not the people who could actually take care of those things were in charge. And so yeah, I think education could be an aspect, but I totally agree that there are deeper stuff that needs to be discussed.
Well, again, I'm so glad you have made it out of Afghanistan safely. Like I really appreciated getting to meet you before all this went down, because following your story through this, I feel like I had more sort of stake in what was going on there. Right.
Yeah.
Knowing you were there, this felt much less like a, TV show, right? There's a real world connection to what's happening. So I'm really, really thankful that you have made it out alive. I've been praying for you guys every day throughout the crisis, and I'm, as much as it sucks, I'm excited to see where your life goes from this point on.
Yeah, I think I'm in a state where I'm just gonna wait and see what happens, but do my best and continue to hope that situation gets better in Afghanistan. But yeah, I'm glad that I'm safe, my family's safe, and yeah, just hope things get better.
And the other encouragement I would give to you is that God has a special love for refugees and for people who don't quite have a real home to go back to. And
yeah,
there's this beautiful passage called Hebrews 11 in the Bible, which talks about the prophets, right? The people God sent to the earth, the people who are wandering the earth in caves with no place to call their home, because they're seeking something better. So
yeah,
while it's a lonely and miserable thing you've gone through in a lot of ways, that there's a lot of beautiful stories that can come out of that, and there's amazing stories God tells through people who are living through the kinds of things you've lived. So I hope that you can keep that hope alive and you can hang on to that. And I hope that the hope you have is not ultimately disappointed.
I hope so too, and I totally agree with that. I do believe that things happen for a reason. So perhaps there's something good, but we'll have to wait what that is. But continue to be hopeful and have faith, and yeah, look for the bright side, I guess.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And thank you guys for listening to the Almeida Initiative podcast. We'll be back next time.